This is Patrick Richardson. I am the Global CMO and Managing Director of the Americas, and this is Humanistic. And today with us, we have Leigha Jarett, Product Manager from Google, working on Flutter. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Leah. So, like you said, I'm a product manager working on Flutter. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and I love living in New York City. So, that's a big part of who I am. But yeah, I work on mostly the iOS and design space within Flutter, and I also manage our relationships with different agencies, which is how I got to know you all at Hedgehog Lab so well.
Yeah, we had an amazing breakfast in New York City just the other day, and it was great catching up with you. What's one of the biggest, I mean, you work at Google, so everybody knows, like, oh, so amazing to work there. But having been there for 4 years, what's the one thing that you love about the business, that might just be a little off the normal reasons everybody loves Google?
Yeah, I feel like my cliche normal answer is the people, but everyone says that. So I think specifically for Flutter, Google kind of has this culture of letting people run small experiments, especially from an engineering perspective, and grow those into products. And that's really how Flutter came about. Don't hold me on the history too tightly because I wasn't there when Flutter first started, but I'm pretty sure it came out of some experiments running on the Chrome team. And I just think that really speaks to Google's culture of letting engineers kind of let their imagination run wild and seeing what types of products we can build from that.
And you came from cloud, right, into Flutter. So what was that transition like, and what were some of the things that you loved about being on the cloud team?
Yeah, so I actually was working at a startup called Looker, and a couple years after I joined, Looker was acquired by Google Cloud. So that's how I ended up inside of GCP. And I worked in Google Cloud for a little more than 2 years. And in that time, I continued to work on Looker, which is a business intelligence platform. So, like creating dashboards, exploring your data. And I also worked a little bit on BigQuery, which is one of the databases that Google Cloud offers. And that was a really great experience because I spent a lot of time working directly with large enterprise customers and learning about their needs. It was very customer oriented. You're often working with a smaller number of really high value customers and trying to understand how we can solve their business priorities. It's very different from the Flutter world, which sits in a whole different part of Google. Flutter, of course, is open source. So we don't even know a lot of the people using Flutter. We don't have a way to say like this specific company is using Flutter unless they proactively reach out to us. We don't know, exactly the names of apps that are built with Flutter from looking at the data that we collect. So it's a really different type of experience.
All right, well, now we're going to go way back. And can you tell me a little about yourself and where you were raised, and a bit about your sort of early days that maybe led you to the great heights that you're at now?
Sure, yeah. I grew up on Long Island, a couple hours outside of New York City. And growing up, I was actually really into art. I love to draw and paint. And if I could show you, like,
Oh, wow.
my this is my little treadmill room art studio, sometimes office that's currently under construction. So yeah, I love to do art. I always thought I would do that as my career. And when I went to college, I actually majored in fine arts for the first year before I switched into the School of Engineering. And I always joke that that was like the best phone call my mom ever received, where I said I decided to change my major from drawing and painting to engineering.
Yeah, I have a
Um,
very similar story. I grew up, I wanted to be an artist. My dad was like, yeah, like, what are you going to do? And when I found graphic design, or commercial art at the time is what they called it, like, I was like, okay, this is a way to appease my dad that I can have a job, but I can also be an artist. So similar story there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I never really knew anyone in like graphic design. I guess I didn't know that much about it or UX design when I was in college, or else I feel like maybe I would have gone down that path more. But that was a big reason why I took the role in Flutter, because when I first learned about Flutter, a big thing that comes up when Tim Sneath, who used to be our product director, would give pitches on Flutter, is he would talk about how designers can bring their wildest dreams to life, and Flutter's this blank canvas. I was like, oh, well, this is a cool way to kind of bridge the gap between technology and art and design.
One other, just an aside, was I've noticed, having been, in development and design and development for probably the last decade, is there's a lot of kids who are in musical departments that, I guess, just like music was sort of like the side gig, and then they were trying to do it, trying to get into it professionally, but they realized, yeah, maybe this isn't right for me, and then they started developing on the side. And so, like, in my past, I've walked across so many people. My last CTO was like a musical major, coming out of school, and now he does computer science. So you did data science for PepsiCo. What was that like?
It was great. So I wound up going to school for biomedical engineering, and I thought maybe I would do research in computational biology. So when I first graduated school, I went to a PhD program where I was trying to get my doctorate degree in computational biology. So after about a year of that, I was like, I think I need to get out of academia. Just it wasn't for me. There's a really long road ahead of you.
Yeah.
So data science was a career that kind of had to do with some of the skills that I had learned in that brief period where I was in the PhD program. I was taking machine learning classes. I was, applying data science techniques just to biological data. So it was a natural progression when I wanted to go into the industry to do something similar, take those same skills and techniques, but apply them to different data sets. And I really liked the team at Pepsi. At the time, they were building up this whole department for e-commerce. And that was kind of a really big but new revenue stream for them. So the sellers, all these grocers were starting to have online markets, Amazon, all these places were selling PepsiCo products online. So our team focused on trying to look at how we can optimize the supply chain for this, how we can optimize marketing channels. And you just had access to so much data, which was really cool.
So you gave me a little of the history that you started in art. You moved into data science. So my big question is, what was the moment that you realized you could do both, or that you had an interest in both? Because I think in my history too, it was like I always thought, like, if you're a artist, everybody said you worked with one side of your brain and you couldn't go do the other side. And when was your moment in time where you were like, I can do this? Like, I have this wonky data side and I have this artistic side. When did that all come to fruition?
Hearing you say that reminds me of my grandpa, who's an electrical or was an electrical engineer, but also an amazing artist. And he would do lots of portraits and just like draw these beautiful pencil drawings that were hanging up all over our house. And he always used to tell me that I had both the left and the right brain, just like him, because my favorite classes in school were always math and art. I could do without, English and history. That's definitely not my forte. But so again, when I went to college, I started off as a fine arts major, but I still took some math courses my first year. And I actually preferred the math classes to my art classes because art classes in college, maybe as you know, are really hardcore. You work really hard and everyone just criticizes all of your art. And I was like, you know what? I think I like math better. If I study hard enough, like I'll get a good grade, whereas art is so subjective.
It's funny. Everybody says it's so peaceful and like art, but in college, I went to Syracuse University. Our first year, which is sophomore year, of the program, we had too many kids. So the professors didn't like that. So they started hazing us, like literally hazing us. So one of our professors would take a Bic lighter and they would go around and look at everybody's work on the wall and they say, who did this? And they, like, literally, there was a story where he burned it off the wall. I mean, people were like sobbing and like leaving. And he was just like, all right, we're getting down to like the people who can stand graphic design. I was really worried about the industry. I was like, is this what it's like? Is this what I'm getting into? And maybe a little it was when I first get into it, but And funny, another story is one of the people that inspired me the most was my grandfather, who was a lawyer for his entire life. And then when he retired, he started painting, and so I saw the softer side of him, and I've got a painting in my house that he sort of inspired me with. So
Oh.
anyway, so let's move back into the technology. So very tech savvy. But how do you use technology in everyday life? What's a day in your life look like in your use of technology?
Well, my husband would definitely disagree with you saying I'm tech savvy because even though I have like an engineering background and I use technology every day, I think like the smaller things I'm always asking him for help with. And even though I work in iOS development, I like have an allergic reaction to downloading too many apps on my phone. I like, if there are more than 2 pages of apps, I'm like, time to do a purge. I don't want this many apps on my phone. It's overwhelming. So he might disagree with you.
Okay.
But definitely in my everyday life, like most people, I'm using my phone way more than I should. I have an addiction to TikTok because I have younger sisters in Gen Z world that are always sending me TikTok videos to watch.
Wow.
I'm very into listening to podcasts, especially everything through the New York Times. I think they do a great job with content. But in the Flutter world, I spend a lot of time trying to actually build demos or like small proof of concepts using the Flutter framework. So you'll often find me on my MacBook with VS Code open and the iOS simulator open, playing around with things, trying to make sure that we have a happy path for users when they're trying to accomplish something.
Excellent. Excellent. Tell it. Do you have a story where you think all the way through from like the beginning to where you're at now that technology maybe changed your life a little? Is there a nugget of something that sort of reminds you of a story?
I think I really fell in love with programming and that sort of technology in this one class I took when I was an undergraduate. So I was majoring in biomedical engineering, and I took this class where we were writing programs to like simulate different like how diseases spread or how a metabolic pathway works in your body, and just like these like basically programming how an algorithm would happen in like real life in a biological sense. And I just remember thinking like it was so powerful, like to be experimenting and reading about what scientists were working on, especially when it came to like genomics data and like cancer research. I think in when I was in college was maybe when they completed the first like human genome sequence, which
Mhm.
is crazy because all of a sudden we had this like file that lives on your computer that says like this is what the normal like human genome sequence is like. Here are all the letters that you would use to represent it. And I just thought that it was so powerful and that there's so many opportunities for doing like really life changing, world changing research if you apply technology to the right types of problems.
Okay, so we're at rose, thorn, and bud. So the rose is tell us something that happened to you, the best thing that happened to you in the last year. And it could be anything. This doesn't have to be business, personal. This is in the intersection of all of it.
Well, like I was telling you before, I did get married this year, so I think it would be wrong of me not to say that.
Yeah.
It was a great wedding. Nothing went terribly wrong, but of course, everything always does go wrong. So
There's a lot to it.
yeah.
Yeah. All
So
right.
great.
What is the biggest challenge you've tackled? We're gonna put the wedding aside because that probably is the biggest challenge you've also faced in the last year. I've been
True.
through it. Well, outside of the wedding, what's the biggest challenge you've been tackling over the past year?
Well, I think a lot of people in the technology space might agree with kind of like the explosion of generative AI at the beginning of last year, really kind of changing the course for a lot of tech companies. It certainly had a big impact on how we're approaching product decisions at Google. Obviously Google is an AI first company, and while Flutter is not necessarily a tool that is specifically used for either developing AI or working with I think we've been trying to spend a lot of time thinking about how we can uh, bring all this AI goodness into the Flutter development world. And of course, this can take a lot of different turns, and some things are kind of obvious, like making sure Flutter apps can easily talk to these Google API AI services. But we're also trying to think more out of the box of how can we more approach this from a creative perspective and do something different that other frameworks or teams aren't thinking of.
And how about a bud? What are you looking forward to in 2024?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm specifically working on in the Flutter team is uh, figuring out how we can make it easier to build custom design systems in Flutter's framework. Right now, we have these two kind of distinct libraries. We have the material library, which follows materials design system, which is used on Android and other Google platforms. And then we have the Cupertino library, which follows Apple's design system. And we've heard a lot of feedback from people that kind of these two separate libraries don't work. It's hard to use them both. Both of them are pretty rigid in terms of customization. You have to bifurcate your code. So we're really trying to tackle this problem and figure out how we can make this easier. And I feel like we're making a lot of progress. So I'm excited to see what next year has to offer there.
So, last question. This one's one big thing. So, give us one big thing as it relates to business, technology, or life that you would just like to pass along to the viewers about your journey, your sort of story between technology, business, and your life.
Yeah, I think I mentor a lot of students, and I give them this advice all the time: is to be excited about what you're working on, especially as a product manager. I think if you're not really excited and passionate about your product, you can't really be a good product manager. You can't inspire other people to use your product. You can't put yourself in your user's shoes. So I would just encourage everyone to try to work on something that you're passionate and excited about. Or if you're not, maybe super passionate about that product, maybe find areas where you can get really excited about something that you're working on.
Well, this is my second time talking to you. I know you're passionate about it. I really thank you for joining us today. Leigha Jarett, Product Manager at Google with Flutter. Thank you very much. And you can get the Humanistic podcast on Spotify and YouTube, or find it right here on Hedgehog Lab. Thanks so much, Leigha.
Great. Thank you for having me.